Welcome to the Crossing Church. This is the version of the Crossing that goes where you go and delivers what you need. Fresh perspectives on faith and Jesus with practical, real-life next steps built in. This is your place to explore faith and experience the life-changing ways of Jesus.
Welcome everyone to The Crossing. My name is Andrew and I am so glad you're joining with us online. Now today we are kicking off a brand new series called Full Spectrum. And probably the best way I can explain this series is to talk about one of the greatest movies of all time, The Never-Ending Story. I don't know if you've seen it, but the premise of this movie is that there is a little boy who's getting bullied. He's a little odd, a bookworm, and one day he's getting picked on and he runs away from these bullies and he ends up in this dusty old bookstore. Now, the owner, who's sitting in a chair reading this mysterious boy, he looks up and he's about to kick the little boy out of his store, but this boy responds. He says, "But no, don't kick me out. I love books. I love to read. I've read all the greatest books." And he lists them. He says, Treasure Island, Last of the Mohicans, Tarzan, Lord of the Rings. To which the old man, pipe in his hand, says, and I'm paraphrasing here, he says, your books are safe. You can read these stories, then put them down and go on with your life. But then he picks up that mysterious book that he's holding. He says, but this book, when you read it, you get transported into it. With this book, you become part of the story. And if you've seen this movie, you know what happens next. The little boy, he steals this mysterious book, opens its pages, and is literally brought into the story. You see, he finds himself part of a bigger, better story than he ever anticipated. He finds himself in the never-ending story. Now, why are we talking about this? It's because this is my hope over the next few weeks. You see, my hope is that we would enter this book, that we would read it, and we would find ourselves brought into a bigger, better story, that we would find ourselves as part of God's story, a story that will challenge us and change us. And to do so, we're going to be looking at what's known as the Book of Psalms. This is the most popular book in the Bible, and the reason for that is that when Jesus walked this earth, it is the book that Jesus quoted most than any other book. It is the book that has shaped the people of God for thousands of years. So, starting today, we are going to do a deep dive into the Book of Psalms. In fact, we've actually created a guide that's going to help us get the most out of this book. If you show up on our campus, we got one of these hard copies for you, but you can always download it at thecrossing.com. And just like the little boy in the never-ending story, I need you to beware. Because this book, God's Word, it is not a safe book. In this book, we meet a holy and transcendent God. In this book, you will see yourself in new ways and in a new light. You see, this book is not safe, but it does call us into a bigger and better story. So today, we're going to begin with Psalm 46. And I want to encourage you to take some notes. And we're going to begin in verse 1. We begin with one word, God. The very first word, God. And already there is so much we can learn. The Hebrew word that we translate here as God is the word Elohim. The word is a title. It means the mighty one, judge, or ruler. It carries the idea of majesty and reverence. Probably the best way I can explain it is a few years back, I got to meet one of our former presidents. And I know all of you right now, you're wondering, well, which former president, Andrew? Was it a good one or a bad one? Well, how about you just pick a president in the past that you like, and let's say that's the one I met. So I'm at this dinner where the former president was. And while I was there, I was told I would get 1 minute to talk with the former president, to take a picture and to meet him. So here I am, I'm in line, and I'm about to meet the President of the United States. And I'm thinking to myself, what on earth am I going to say? I mean, what do you have to say to the most powerful person on the face of the planet? What story could I possibly tell? What anecdote could I possibly give that would make a memorable impression on someone like that to remember me? I mean, he was and is one of the most powerful people on the planet. Now, again, I'm a pastor, which means I talk for a living, so something like this you think would be easy for me. But as I stepped up to meet the president, I totally froze. I mean, I was waiting in line and I saw like the army of security guards protecting the president. I'm looking at all the assistants, and so I just totally blanked and totally froze. I got up to him, I shook his hand, I took my picture. I don't even think I introduced myself, and right when the picture was done, I like ran off. Because there was just something about being in the midst of greatness. I mean, I had no words, nothing I could say. That's the idea here of the word Elohim. You see, Psalm 64 begins with clarity, that this story we are part of, but we are not the main character. This story, it is bigger than just us. You see, this is God's story. And sure, we have a part to play, but at the end of the day, He is Lord. He is ruler. He is above all. He is creator of everything. He is God, and therefore I am not. And so with that, let's jump into God's story and our place in it. Verse 1 again. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. If you have your Bible with you, I want you to circle the word refuge, because what we find is this is the story of God, but here we enter into it. Here's what we see in verse 1. I run, but God is my refuge. Now this word refuge, it isn't a word we use very often. The best way I can describe it is growing up, I have an older brother. Today my brother and I, we get along great. But back in the day, like most brothers, we fought a lot. In fact, these two pictures really describe our relationship. One moment, things are great. And the very next moment, he is all smiles while I am just sobbing. I mean, this is life when you have a brother who is 5 years older than you. This is life when your brother is bigger and stronger and faster than you. I mean, every time we fought, he won and I lost. Until I learned as the younger brother, I have one advantage. That there is one thing that my brother was powerless against. My one recourse, Mom. I learned that even my big, bad brother wouldn't dare hit me in the presence of Mom. So, in theory, I could just sneak up, hit my brother on the back of the head as hard as I could. I could sprint downstairs to the living room where my mom was, and if I could just run and make it into her presence, I was totally and completely safe. You see, my mom was my refuge. When I was in trouble, when I was in need, I could run to her and find safety. You see, all of us, we run to what we believe is refuge. Which begs the question, where are you running today? You know, when things get hard, when you are tired or worried or anxious, what do you run towards? Some of you right now, your marriage is hard. But instead of focusing on what's wrong or getting help, you've decided to run somewhere else. And it may not be an affair that you're running towards. It might be just you're running towards your work because you feel valued there. You feel successful. All the things lacking in your marriage, you're experiencing at work. And you can say, oh, work, needs me right now, but really you are just running from your marriage. Or maybe something is missing in your life right now. But instead of dealing with it, whenever you have a few moments free, you just pick up your phone and you just find yourself scrolling on Instagram or watching show after show on Netflix. See, you are running from something that is underneath the surface of your life. Maybe you're running towards alcohol. You're drinking more and more every week to take the edge off. Or maybe you're struggling with a substance or pornography. You see, when life gets difficult, when life gets exhausting, the truth about all of us, we run. We run to the things that we think will provide safety and security for us. We run to where we think we will find pleasure or success or validation. But I'll tell you, most of these places we run, they are temporary. They are quick fixes. But we find here in verse 1 that there is one place. There is one person who can provide us with refuge. There is only one place where we are safe and secure, where we are welcomed unconditionally. You see, we run, but God is our refuge. Verse 1 again, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. See, our author here, in the second part of this verse, he paints the worst case scenario. And you guys ever do that? Maybe you're like me and you have the gift of seeing all the things that can possibly go wrong in a situation. See, the author of this psalm paints the picture of everything possible going wrong. Even the ground beneath our feet giving way, the mountains falling into the sea. The idea here is what do we do when things in life, the things we count on most, the things that we think will provide us with relief and refuge, those things that we were just talking about, what do we do when they crumble beneath our feet? What do we do? What happens in life when everything you counted on falls apart? Back in 2008, my wife and I, we bought our first home, which was really exciting for us. Until you remember what happened in 2008. The real estate market, it fell apart. So it felt like one day we were moving into our very first place, all excited, and it felt like the very next day, our world fell apart. The church I was working at back then was hit hard by the financial crisis. Within a few months, they were doing layoffs, and my job got cut. So here I was, 26 years old, married, mortgage. I also had school debt, car debt. I couldn't afford any of it. And I had no idea what to do because no one was hiring. What do you do when it feels like the ground beneath you crumbles? Where do you turn when life gets flipped upside down? What do you do when you feel stuck or lost? Well, what we see here in Psalm 64 is what we learn is that my part, even the worst moments, is part of God's bigger story. And that when I reach out, God, He responds. Our greatest need in life is to know we're not alone. A couple of weeks ago, my kids were getting ready for bed. Something happened where they got scared. It was nothing major, but if you're a parent, you have definitely had this moment. Your kids are scared, it's time for bed, what do? I mean, you can't help them rationally understand that there's no monsters in their room. You can't threaten them into feeling safe or secure. You can't prove to them that they are safe. All you can do in that moment is be with them. So that night, my kids asked, Dad, can you check on us every 4 minutes? Not sure exactly why 4 minutes, but every 4 minutes, they would call out, Dad, can you check on us? And every time, I was right there with them. What are they doing? They're scared. They feel alone. And so they do the only thing they could think of. They reached out. They believed. They hoped that their Father would be there for them to keep them safe and secure. They wanted to know, Dad, are you with me right now? Dad, do you promise you will never leave me? See, Psalm 46, the author, he reaches out to God. Verse 1, one more time. God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. You see, God, He is ever-present. Our God is never too busy, never too preoccupied for you. When we reach out, when we call out to Him, our God, He responds. Or verse 7, the Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. You see, when we reach out to God, He responds. In fact, we find this theme all over the book of Psalms. Psalm 17, I call on you, my God, for you will answer me. Turn your ear to me and hear my prayer. Show me the wonders of your great love, you who save by your right hand. Or Psalm 18, in my distress I called to you, Lord. I cried to my God for help. From His temple He heard my voice. My cry came before Him into His ears. Or Psalm 28, praise be to the Lord, for He has heard my cry for mercy. Psalm 120, I call on the Lord in my distress, and He answers me. You see, the list goes on and on. When we reach out, our God, He responds. He meets us right where we are. Now, I want to be really clear on this. This does not mean that God is like the genie in the movie Aladdin. God just doesn't do exactly what we want. In fact, years ago, I had someone explain how God responds, and their explanation was so helpful to me, I thought I would share it with you today. They told me that when we are in need, God will respond in one of three ways. So here they are. Sometimes, God will save us from the fire. For example, your spouse says, I want a divorce. Our marriage is done. And in that moment, you're shocked, you're scared. You plead for one more chance. You pray for one more chance, but your spouse says no. But what they do say yes to is to see a counselor. And then something happens, a miracle. And before the paperwork can even be finalized, you guys decide to try again. You see, sometimes we reach out and God responds by saving us from the fire or hardship. Or sometimes God will save us in the fire. You find a lump and you are terrified it's cancer. You pray. Your small group prays. You ask me to pray. Then the results come in and it's cancer. And you are heartbroken and you wonder, where are you, God? And so you start chemo and it's difficult and exhausting and it's the hardest thing you've ever done. But it's in the fire. It's in this pain. You begin to see the cancer shrink. You see, this season of life you never would have chosen. But now, fast forward a couple years later, and you look back and you see how God has moved. You see how all the people who showed up for you, you see how God brought the right people, the right small group, the right doctors, the right nurses, the right church, all into your life at just the right time, and God saves you in the fire. Now, this might be where you are today. You might be in a struggle or a fire right now. Maybe you are battling an addiction or a struggle today. Maybe you don't feel God or understand what God is doing. But what I can promise you is God is in the fire with you. And as a church, we are committed to being in it with you as well. And then third, sometimes God will save us through the fire. You see, the reality of this broken world is that someday our time on this earth will end. The death rate of a human being is still right at 100%. But because God is our refuge, because we can call out to God and be saved, what we learn is death on earth is never the end of the story. 2 Corinthians 4:17 says, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes, not on what is seen, but what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." That when we face all the trials on this earth, all of them are temporary. All of them pale in comparison with eternity with our God. You see, our pain is real. Our pain is often excruciating. But we are part of a bigger story. We are part of God's bigger story. And our place is to begin to understand where we fit in this bigger story. You see, I run, but God is my refuge. I reach out and God responds. And then finally, we see how God responds in verse 10. Verse 10, God says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." God says we can be still because we are part of God's story. I rest because God reigns. The only way I can rest is to know that there is a God who is a good, who is a perfect, who is wiser and stronger than me, and he is at work in this world. Another way to translate this phrase, "be still," is stop striving. Just stop. Slow down. God says, yes, you have a part to play in this world. Yes, you have things to do, responsibilities to take care of, but the weight of this world, it does not land on your shoulders or on mine. See, there is a God who reigns over this world, and it's not you. God reigns. See, and when I run to him, when I reach out to him, what I find over time is because God is my refuge, because he responds to me, that now I can rest. And of course, you and I both know that rest is not just kicking up your feet and watching TV. Real rest is living in the assurance that I am part of a bigger story. A story where God promises in Deuteronomy 31, "The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged." It's where God promises that there will come a day when, in Revelation 21, he, God, will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, no more mourning or crying or pain. See, I rest because God reigns. And I don't know about you, but I need that this week. I know all of us have probably been following the news in Israel, the tragic loss of life, the fighting that is taking place, the hostages that have been taken, and the brutality and the horrific stories that just continue to roll in every day. And of course, we know it's not just happening in Israel. It's in the Ukraine, in Syria, in Yemen, and countless other places. See, you go and turn on the news or on social media, and there are lots of people who claim to have all the answers, or people who claim to speak for God. And it's easy to get caught up on all of this, to let our anxiety spike, because we're all looking for answers. We're all wondering, is anyone in control of this broken world? And I'll just say, I don't think it's a coincidence that today we are starting a series on Psalm 46, where we read in verse 8 that God, he makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shield with fire. See, I read these words and I am reminded that with God, when I worry, I can run to him for refuge. That when I reach out in pain and sadness, that he will respond. And even though I don't understand why God allows so much hurt in this world, I rest because in his hands, he reigns. You see, I rest because I know there will come a day when God will make all wars cease, that we have a God who is strong enough, that one day he will shatter every weapon, so that while our church and as individuals, we have a responsibility to help those who are attacked and oppressed and are hurting, we know that there is a God who is at work. We are called to respond with what we can do, what little we can, but ultimately this world, it's God's world. And so I have permission to rest. Jesus said it this way. He said, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Say, today I want to invite you into this story. Today I want to invite you to God's story and to our place in it. See, the book of Psalms is an invitation to a bigger and better story. It's an invitation to God's story and our place in it. So today, have you been running? Today, maybe you need to recognize that God is our ultimate refuge. Do you feel scared or alone? Do you need to reach out and see that our God will respond? Or maybe you are in need of rest. See, this book, Psalms, is an invitation to meet this God. You know, next week on our campus, we're going to be celebrating baptism. And if you're in the area, I would love to invite you personally to join with us, because baptism is one of those weeks where we hear how God responds and how God moves. One of my favorite stories is seeing the story of God work in the life of Kylie and her family. You know, she came to our church about 6 years ago, and she was 3 months pregnant, going through a really tough divorce at the time. And she would tell you this was the hardest season of her life. She felt alone and scared and hurt, but she showed up here. And she began to hear that there is a God who is at work in this world and at work in our lives. That there is a refuge for those who are hurting and those who are in their darkest seasons of life. She heard a message and experienced that when you reach out, there is a God who always responds, who will never leave you, who meets us right where we are at. So Kylie, she started coming every single week. She found a home in this place. She found people who care for her, love her, and support her. And then one day, in a service, a lot like this one that we're doing right now, I asked if anyone wants to experience that love and forgiveness that Jesus offers, if anyone wants to go public and be baptized, you can do that today. It's just, baptism is just that outward expression of what God is doing internally in our lives. So I asked that question, and I said, today can be your day. And in that moment, she decided, I run, but God will be my refuge. That in my darkest moments, I will reach out because I know God responds. And so I can rest because God is with me. And so on June 6th, 2023, Kylie was baptized. She experienced the life-changing ways of Jesus. Oh, and one more cool thing with her story. That divorce that she'd been going through, as brutal as it was, as God was working in Kylie, God was also working in her ex's life. And now their story is not just of God saving them, but about a year ago, they met up and God started a story of reconciliation in their relationship. And so now Kylie and John are living proof that you and I, that we are invited into God's bigger story. That there is grace and there is forgiveness and there is hope in every single relationship. It was true for them and it can be true for you today. So, if you have never been baptized, I want to actually encourage you today. You could reach out to me at andrew@thecrossing.com, and we will do whatever we can to help you take that next step. And on top of that, I want to encourage every single one of us watching today. I want to invite you to journey through the book of Psalms with us. I want you to take 15 minutes over the next 5 days and start reading along with us. Again, you can download the resource on our website, and tomorrow morning, I want to encourage you to jump into Psalm 46 with me, and you can experience being part of God's bigger story. Let's pray. So God, we come to you today, and we say thank you. Because God, you are our refuge. God, when we cry out, when we need you, you respond. And God, we choose today to rest with the assurance that you reign over this world. We love you, God. We pray this in your Son's name. Amen.
I've carried a burden for too long on my own. I wasn't created to bear it alone. And I hear your invitation to let it all go. And I see it now, I'm laying it down. And I know that I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, oh. You saw my condition, had a plan from the start. Your son for redemption, the price for my heart. And I don't have the context for that kind of love. I don't understand, I can't comprehend. All that I need is you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I'll run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, oh. My heart has been in your sight long before my first breath. Running into your arms is running to life from death. And I feel this rush deep in my chest. Your mercy is calling out. And just as I am, you pull me in. And I know I need you now. So I'll run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So run to the Father again and again. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I'll run to the Father again and again and again and again.